that was why they chose to live there. Some people can't afford, I understand that there is a situation where some people need to rent, and that's where they only can afford, and we feel, difficult for that, but that's what we've zoned, and that's what the people, that's what the community determined, that's what they want that neighborhood to look like, mixed use. So I think that's what we have to look at when it comes to, nobody wants to just shut down the business, because that's not what the law ordinance is on the books. What we want to do is make sure we work with them to come up with some kind of happy medium.
Lieutenant, did you want to add to, or did you have any more?
I agree with a lot of what was said there, and I certainly realize that it's a mixed use neighborhood, but I also think that this is unprecedented. I don't think that we had live outside amplified music to the frequency with which we've had it, and I understand there's a difference because of COVID. So I think Steve just said we do have to find a happy medium where they can sustain themselves. But I do think that this is kind of a new scenario with the frequency and sometimes the volume. I think maybe a few times a year they had an outdoor venue, and I think the change due to COVID is what is really getting people to notice it.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who didn't live behind the stone church at all in the past year, was it like almost every night that there was an outdoor event during the summer? Or I know that I had heard that there were many that were going on, but was it like 6-7 nights a week, or was it like 5 or 4 nights a week?
I didn't keep track, so I don't want to speak out of turn. It seemed like maybe it was more than just on the weekends, like sometimes during weeknights. If that's the answer to your question, I don't think it was every week. I think it was more than just weekends. But during the week, it definitely ended at an appropriate. Oh, we've got a comment here. It says 6 nights most of the year for Mike Hoffman.
Yeah, one of the things that we've been getting complaints about, there's speakers on the outside that were approved years ago that allow people, say if they want to go outside and have a cigarette, or they're coming in, they can hear the music, so they're not missing it. I'm not sure if it just wasn't on, but that was permitted by the planning board when they got site plan approval many years ago. So that's, that's not a complaint. You can't complain about that, because that's part of their approval, and they have that. It may be annoying, but they have the right to have that there.
But it also seems like a good opportunity to work with the residents and the business owners to make sure that there's a happy medium. So,
right.
There's nothing saying that you can't continue that dialogue too, even if there is, new licensing that comes in.
Correct. But I mean, they also, at the end of the day, though, could say, this is what we were approved, this is what we get.
Yeah. Tony, I saw your hand a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of comments. I think that we're kind of talking about two different issues.
We are.
So I want to bring it back to the information that we had in front of us, because I have strong feelings about the Stone Church, and I think that what we allow, whether that's as a licensing board or as a town council or as the town manager, like I think that there are extenuating circumstances that need to be discussed, and this year and last year were, they're just unprecedented, and we all know that. So but what we're talking about in this licensing board would continue well past the pandemic, and so I think that it's important to keep that in mind. And so there are a couple items that I just wanted to get back to, if you don't mind. So one was 5.7, and it's that a police officer may be assigned to a particular function when deemed necessary.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to be sure that the licensing board would be the people who would deem that necessary, because the expenses are, it also says the expenses shall be borne by the individual or organization. So it would be the licensing board that would make that determination. Is that, that's,
I'd have to double check, but I believe it's actually, I think the chief of police has the authority to determine that under his statutes, but I'll double check. Yeah,
I believe that is correct. That he
Yeah.
has the ability to dictate that.
Does the chief of police still have that authority in general? I
yeah,
believe that they did, even without the current ordinance
do.
being passed.
okay, perfect. And so it's similar if there was a parade in town or, you know, like that
he
type of,
here's a perfect example. In 3 weeks, we're gonna have the road race.
and
we cut-
they pay for the
Right.
presence.
Yep.
So the town wouldn't be responsible for that.
Nope.
And then the next item was 5.8, and that was that 1 a.m. Jumped out at me. So where did that time come from? And
That
is that reasonable for Newmarket?
because this is for indoors too, and last call is 1 a.m. Is this? Yeah, I think it's still 1 a.m.
It is, unless the town grants a permit
Right.
to go further. They changed that a few years ago, but I don't know of many towns.
Now,
Yeah.
I remember Hampton was going to, but they never switched it.
Right.
So that's why it's there. They need to, so basically they need to stop playing music when they also stop having alcohol.
Okay. Great.
I mean, and don't get me wrong, if it was an outdoor one, it's not gonna go on until 1 a.m.
Right. I wouldn't imagine.
Yeah,
For the record, I can see it. It does say it was approved by the state legislature that some communities can go as far as 2 a.m., but it has to be approved.
yeah, I remember at that point, I brought that up and everyone was like, no, we don't want to deal with that.
I did have a couple of questions if I could. I know at one point in time we had a fairly well-functioning ballroom. To my knowledge, I believe it's still going to become a ballroom. And I was curious because Councilor Weinstein had mentioned, dancing, balls and related. And I guess I would be concerned in general about enacting new legislation, new rules that would affect businesses that have for a very long time been, good, upstanding organs within the community. And I would be afraid that if we passed anything, we say, oh, hey, well, guess what, ballroom? Now you have X, Y, or Z that you have to be aware of. And I mean, I don't really know of any significant problems that have come from them or any real serious complaints that came up regarding Stone Church until this previous year.
But
Do you
But when
foresee?
no, not really, but I think it's one of those situations that we would just charge them a license and say, yeah, you're allowed to operate a ballroom.
So they don't have a license now. They're zoned to be a ballroom out there
Right,
and they're allowed to
correct.
operate. Could
Correct.
they be open till 4 a.m. if they wanted to, or is there anything currently stopping that?
I don't think there is anything currently stopping.
Okay, so this could theoretically impact them, but odds are it may be minimal with respect to the license.
And
grant.
we're allowed to, and say if they want to have, I don't think they still do, but I know in the 20s, they had people dancing all night long till, if sorry, the movie. I can't remember what the movie was, but they could always come in and ask for a waiver. You're allowed to waive it.
That's fair. You said for the licensing board was the police chief, council chair, and did you say town manager?
Yep, or his or her designee.
Right, does that apply for all three of them? So police chief could assign somebody else or like within the department, or is it typically?
Nope, it's actually the only position I think it was is the manager.
Okay. Do we have any freedom here to put on a member of the public or related? So it's not just three individuals that one could argue, well, it's the town doesn't like me, yada, yada, yada type of thing, or?
Don't believe so, because I think in the RSA, I'm just pulling up the licensing board. It has to consist of the active head of the police department, the mayor of such city, and any other persons who shall be appointed by the city government. So, which
Most typically you or somebody else that you
Right.
decide.
which should have delegated, investigated, decide, grant a license of the chapter, and may grant revocable blanket licenses to fraternal and other local organizations, to theaters, and to undertakers. I don't know
Bad.
I don't think they mean undertakers as in mortuary. I think they mean anyone who's undertaking a situation. This again was written in 1850. So
Gotta love New Hampshire sometimes. All right, fair enough. What are the general thoughts on this? I mean, as a committee, because what I don't want to happen is us to either leave fragmented or in any way, shape, or form unhappy with this, because it is important to me that if we write up a report and present it to the town council and say, council, we believe that this would be in the best interest of everybody, let's move forward with it and have, Councilor Weinstein not be happy, Lieutenant Jordan not be happy, related. I guess what I'm asking is, if we were to take something as is, this is what we're legally allowed to do, would we feel comfortable moving forward with some more in-depth conversations to getting this approved and enacted into law? Anybody? Feedback? I guess what I'm saying is, we would need to present a recommendation to the town council, yay or nay, explore, don't explore, pass, don't pass.
what I would, council, what I would ask is that this committee votes to forward the ordinance on to the town council for their action. That way it's on the record that this committee said, yes, we do believe that it's necessary, and goes forward. If you want to get into the minutia, that's what you would do now, is say, look, I want to change XYZ.
Well, that's what I'm asking. Are there reservations with how this is written, or do we feel comfortable presenting this and recommending it to the town council for passage?
I feel comfortable presenting it as is, understanding that some of the other questions I had will be answered at the next step in the process.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. It's helpful to know, because not being one who likes to add more laws, it seems reasonable and prudent and something worthwhile for the council to discuss as a whole. But if we don't all feel that way, it's helpful to have that voiced now instead of 3 or 4 weeks from now.
I agree also.
Okay.
I think one thing I'm kind of still processing, and this is why I couldn't respond right away, I'm like still kind of, my wheels are turning.
It's a lot.
So I apologize if it doesn't come out of my mouth in a cohesive way. I can try again. But I think the thing I'm a little bit stuck on is the process for like deciding waiving the fee or something. I'm imagining, what does that process look like, especially sticking with Councilor Weinstein's example of the small Black Lives Matter demonstrations that were happening, assuming, as sad as this is, like there will be another incident that causes people to want to demonstrate for Black Lives Matter again, I would imagine in the very near future. And, so if someone wants to do that, they go to get a permit, but they're just like individuals. They're not part of a nonprofit necessarily. Do we have a criteria, like a list of criteria in which situation we would waive this fee?
Right.
Go before the licensing board? Like,
it does
around time.
And sometimes, again, with any law and ordinance, and you don't want to put everything in writing because you're going to miss something. If you get too in depth, then you don't have the way to say, again, if the Girl Scouts want to come out and put a table on the downtown, where no one's going to charge them a permit or a fee there. But to be honest, this is something we've had for a long time. If somebody goes, hey, I would like to do this on the sidewalk downtown. Well, we don't have the right to, deny or give permission, or we don't have anything out there to say, oh yeah, no, you have to do this, this, and this. I think anytime that comes up, it's the board has to be the one who decides that. It's not the chief or the manager or the chair. The board would have to determine it together.
Counselor.
One of the items, this reminds me of the raffle discussion that we had years ago. And because there's some similarities there, it's the small independent, or the small nonprofit in town that's just trying to do good by the citizens of the community, versus somebody going door to door who's outside of our community, who's maybe scamming, and and so it's those types of issues. And so and I guess I feel the same way about this, is I want to be sure that it's timely. So maybe the criteria, maybe we don't want to put too much specificity there, but we do want to make sure that it's done in a timely way. So let's say, I hate to even let's say there's some incident that then there wants to be, that we want to have a candlelight vigil for.
Then that's fine. That'd be no problem. Then I don't think, on the flip side though, is I don't want somebody to come in at 4 o'clock to try to have a circus that night, and then we have to pull it together. I think that's if you do it, you can't have, that's why you can't put the words in there.
Right.
Because then you're going to say, oh, you know what? You let it for this person, you got to let it for me. So I think it's the judgment. I think it has to be the judgment of the board. And yes, you're going to have, and this is an ordinance that's going to stick around for a long time, and you're going to probably have some bad boards at some point, which you always do in any political situation. But that's we don't make the laws like this just for today. We make them for a long time, but we also can't, in the words of somebody once told me, you can't stop stupid. You can't foolproof every ordinance out there. And I think that's the decision of the community too. At that time, they elected or appointed those individuals to be on that by virtue of their office. That's what happens. So,
Tony, I feel like, to your concerns too, I feel like as it's presented in the state language, it is very broad, but aimed more at the commercial production type of things that you would reasonably expect to want to have permitted or licensed, or the town at least being aware of. If somebody's going to walk tigers through downtown to put on a show at the bandstand, probably more of a bigger concern than gathering for several vigils per year for terrible public events.
Right.
But I think that go ahead.
Just remember that a quorum of the board is 2. So if there's an emergency and the police chief and the town manager designee meet as the licensing board, they could approve it. Or if the chair meets with the police chief and I think it's the same thing. You could do it as emergency, even under the right to know law.
Would it be beneficial or helpful to include in this that the board should be providing a quarterly report of approvals and denials? So theoretically there's a public record. If people felt like, oh, I feel like my event's always getting denied or some sort of thing, we have a way of pointing to it and be like, well, not really. Or
no, there would be
helpful.
There's a public record. There'll be we'll put it on file at the clerk's office, and people can come see what permits are granted or denied. And the police are definitely going to have one, because they're going to have to enforce it, so they can see if there is a permit. So there'll be records out there of what's out there, and we have to take minutes.
Yeah.
If the licensing board meets, they have to take minutes so you can see that's the record. Is it what was approved or what was not?
Fair enough. All right. Well, assuming there's no more discussion, and please feel free to raise your hand, I would be comfortable accepting a motion to recommend this to the town council for adoption. That'd be in line, correct, Mr. Town Manager?
Yep, absolutely.
I will make a motion to forward this to the town council for approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second that motion.
Steve, should we do roll call, or is it just
you know what, you could just say, and I vote. If you vote yes, then yes, because I mean a motion a second is usually a vote. So
okay, then
if you say yes,
yes, yeah. In favor.
Okay.
All right. Alrighty, perfect. Then I will draft up something very briefly and forward it off to the chair of the town council. It's fairly convenient that she's in this.
And we'll get this in the form for an ordinance. So
Perfect.
it may not be the well, no, we got 2 weeks. Yeah, probably will be the next meeting for the first reading.
Yeah.
And one thing I may, again, the other thing is what I was thinking is that we're still under emergency powers, that this may go into effect, but we still can waive the emergency powers portion of this is also in effect, that we can allow certain things to happen during this. So we're putting it on the books, but it may not look like this until after the pandemic is over.
I did actually want to ask, I did notice in there, and it just dawned on me when I was moving the document over. I think you said it was April 30th that the licenses would expire.
Yeah.
Was that state law, or is there a reason why it line up with the fiscal year?
No, because I would have rather done it with the fiscal year, but I remember, let me pull up the law, and I thought it was April 30th.
Yeah, it was. I'm pretty sure it was April 30th, but I wasn't sure if that was something.
Yeah, it is April 30th, and I'm trying to remember if John found it or we found the date and it was like, oh, that's a strange. Yeah, I'll double check.
Okay.
Yeah, because all licenses granted under the preceding section shall be valid until May 1st.
Perfect.
That's state law, so yeah.
All right, it works. There's a reason for it.
Yeah.
Was there any new business to come before the committee, Councilor Weinstein?
So I don't know if this is new business, but I do. So then, to get back to the Stone Church, so if we adopt this ordinance, we're looking at another month. At best case scenario, another month before the ordinance is adopted, and then the committee would have to meet. And so let's say 5 weeks, 6 weeks, before there's a resolution for both the Stone Church and the community members. And I wonder if we, and you mentioned like the emergency powers, and so I wonder if we need to have a discussion about that.
It's my intention to still go back to what it was and make the request of the Stone Church till 9 p.m. Under the emergency. The reason why we reduced it in the wintertime was because the lack of leaves and those kind of, it's just, there's not as many buffers in the winter, but we do need to realize the weather is getting warmer, then the light is staying lighter later. And again, they can't be inside yet at the levels that they need to survive. So my feeling is until such time as the board is there, and I'd go with another emergency order saying 9 o'clock Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and 8 o'clock on Sunday, if that's allowed. That's after discussing it with them and the chief of police and fire chief for public safety situation. And then once
are they allowed inside? Sorry.
I'm sorry.
How many people are they allowed inside, out of curiosity? I went to one event there prior to the pandemic that was packed.
Right. And I don't know their seating is prior, but now it's still, you need to have the 6 feet without, you still need to, you can't have a band. There's regulations on what the band can look like, regulations on what say if they were doing karaoke, on what they're going to do with that. Like you have to sanitize, you have to be 10 feet away from anybody. And it was, yeah. My understanding it's 50 now. It used to be 190 that people could be in there, as well as you used to have 6 nights a week of music in the old days.
Fair enough.
So.
And just for the record, I mean, I don't know if I recall, and that was a decision that you had made as a town manager together with the fire chief and the police chief. Is that correct?
Yes. The emergency management team minus the building inspector.
And so I know that I personally don't have a concern, and and I agree that I think 9 o'clock is reasonable on Friday and Saturday, and that Sunday until 8 o'clock is also reasonable. And so I don't have an issue with that. I just want to make sure. I do think that there needs to be some clarity.
Yep.
Just for the community and some consistency so that people just know what the expectations are.
Yep. Absolutely.
Mhm.
And it helps us too. I mean, when the police have to go up there and, you know, if they get a call like at 6 o'clock that it's too noisy, well, you know, it's still operations. They can do that. But 10 o'clock would be too late.
I hate to ask this, but if somebody calls in a noise complaint for this specific business or other businesses, but it's within permanent hours, do the police still go out there to
They still have the right to go
investigate,
up
or-
there. Oh, absolutely they do. They have the right to.
But they're not required to go and take time out if we know that it's, 7 PM on a Friday evening.
I will say that we often respond, and we usually will let them know of the complaint, and they're usually pretty responsive when we talk to them. If it's early, we're not saying they have to shut it down. We're just making them aware, and a lot of times they'll do what they can to help mitigate the complaint. But oftentimes it's just us letting them know that we're getting some complaints. But we haven't. I don't think we've had to be up there to tell them that they've been beyond the hours that they've been told they can operate. Just there's been a few times where there might have been a couple people outside just being a little bit loud that we might have had to ask them to quiet them down, and they've been very responsive to that.
Do you typically follow up with the folks who call in the complaint, or is it just somebody makes the call and let's go let the church know that they got a complaint?
We do oftentimes if they require it or if they want to follow up. Sometimes people don't want to leave their name or any information. In that instance, we won't follow up, but I would say it's a little bit of both.
Okay. I appreciate it. It's helpful to know from an enforcement and investigatory standpoint, what you and your staff have to deal with. But I do appreciate the feedback. So. Well, we're at 8:02, almost a full hour. I don't see anything any pressing matters, so I'm going to go ahead and call us adjourned. And sometime after the next council meeting, we may meet again, whether to discuss this or other issues. So stay tuned.
Sounds good. Thanks,
Have a good
everybody.
evening.